Welcome to this episode of the Secret 2 podcast, where we speak to industry leaders to give us their hidden success formulas across film, TV, music and FMCG industries. All brought to you by Paradise, the agency for entertaining brands. I'm your host, Emma Bartholomew. Today, we're bringing you the Secret 2, engaging audiences around authentically sustainable festivals and events. And I'm really delighted to be joined today by two people who have vast experience and connections in this world, Claire O'Neill and Chris Barrett. Welcome to The Lens, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us maybe to start off with a little bit about your current roles and perhaps how they connect to the subject of sustainability in the live sector? Claire, I'll start with you.
Sure. So we started back in around about 2005 with a company called A Greener Future, which is a not-for-profit that was originally working in, it was called A Greener Festival, and it was originally working in festival sector. And the idea at that point was to just raise awareness and to create a reason for festivals to engage in any kind of sustainability actions. So we started the Greener Festival Award, which looked at things like waste, power, transport, water, but also communication and behaviour change. And then over the years that has evolved. We rebranded this year to A Greener Future. And we work with arenas, tours, we work in the music industry, but also in sports. We certified our first football club this year. And my role is as the CEO and co-founder, but I get involved in a lot of the, senior level consultancy. And we organise the Green Events and Innovations Conference that brings the whole live sector together once a year on this subject of sustainability. It's kind of varied, the elements that we've started working on, from certification through to training and training assessors internationally. The consultancy side of it branches everything from policy to providing sustainability managers on the ground, to net zero strategy and CO2 analysis. And we've also got the sustainability diagnosis, where we almost check the pulse of an organisation and see where are you at the moment in relation to all of the pillars of sustainability. So it's basically the sole purpose of why we exist, is sustainability in events.
Yeah, wow. And have you found that the overall live sector is kind of coming to you more now, or is it you going out to them and kind of spreading the message of what you do?
It's mostly almost 100% the live sector coming to us, but we've been really lucky, we have the great support of various parts of the media in the live industry, because they promote what we do. People have started giving us awards and stuff, which is really nice. Like,
congratulations, that's
we've
brilliant.
Given out loads of awards over the years.
Yeah.
Now it's our turn.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been profiled really well, but because we started nearly 20 years ago, originally we were like knocking on people's doors saying, hey, this is a nice thing to do, and then creating a little bit of competition between people as well. Whereas now it's kind of double-edged or triple-edged or multifaceted, let's say.
Yeah, we'll run out of edges otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. There's a sphere. So there's some organisations are big enough that they've got legal obligations for sustainability reporting. Then there's the push of audiences and what audiences want that's spurring some people to act. And then there's also the fact that we're getting very close to a deadline as far as climate change is concerned, and we're seeing increasing amounts of biodiversity loss and then pollution, etc. So all of the organisations that we work with are obviously made up of individuals, and everybody can feel something needs to change. So we get a lot of approaches from the industry now as to how do we navigate this transition, which we're all learning about all the time. No one has all the answers, but it's fun.
But that's really encouraging that people are coming to you. Really love to hear that. Chris, how about you? Tell us a little bit about what you do and how it connects to this.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the expert that Claire is in this field, but I oversee content at Access All Areas. So that's a string of events, awards, conferences. There's the magazine, website, podcast series, video series. And sustainability and event sustainability really is something I've been covering in detail for a long time. I've had a couple of issues that I've dedicated to the subject. So the entire magazine is just focused, drilled down onto sustainability at live events. And it's been really encouraging to see the industry, I think, move very much its focus towards that area. You now have, AEG, which is one of the biggest global players, obviously appointed a sustainability director earlier this year. Live Nation, you've got someone called Vicky Chapman, who very much oversees the Green Nation environmental charter for them. And obviously that's a huge multinational operation. And just from, my experience in this industry, from going to sustainability focused panels at conferences maybe 10 years ago, and there'd be a dribble or a trickle of people through the door and the room would be half full. Now you're seeing those panels at the top of the agenda, you're seeing those rooms full and people very much wanting to learn and wanting to engage. So it's very encouraging in that way.
Yeah, that is. And it kind of preempts my first question, which was going to be, how are we doing as a sector, as an industry? And it sounds from what you've both just said as if we are placing, well, I'll ask this as a question, are we placing the urgency we need on this subject in terms of sustainability? Is it up there? It sounds like it is, but is that industry wide?
I think it's definitely profiled highly in the conversation now. Whether that's translated fully across the sector into action is to be seen, and that's not necessarily for lack of trying. It's quite difficult to change a part of a system when the whole system needs changing. And so, for example, if you want to have a green tour, but the way that tours are planned and deal structures happen, so the way that you can earn money as an artist, the culture of the industry is still about very fast-paced, kind of big productions on one end of it. And that means that how can you decouple that from a fossil fuel industry? If you're needing to take like two different like sets of top steels, for instance, the different venues, you need more trucks on the road because of the fast pace. So that's one side of it, that there's a willingness, but there's big changes that need to happen that can't happen overnight. And then on the other hand, there's still a kind of a hangover of a previous culture where so long as things are more difficult and cost more, then it's a lot harder to get them across the line. But one of the positives is that globally, and when I say globally, I mean across all sectors, the sustainable option or the ecological option is becoming more aligned with the economic option. As fuel gets more expensive, as electricity is more expensive, material usage is more expensive, then that will start to align from a cost basis, along with the public opinion and perception that people aren't going to support things that aren't good for their future.
Yeah.
So I think that it's still, there's a willingness, people are paying attention, and it's just going to take a little bit of time for it to click in and turn into real significant change. But there is a lot of action in the meantime. There's a lot of good stuff happening. It's just not completely holistic yet.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of change takes time and education and engagement and all of those things. But I have noticed over the last few years, especially on the media coverage side, which, Chris, this might be something that you cover, I don't know. But for example, criticism of huge tours that take out unknown numbers of trucks to get a huge production, not just on the road in one country, but across the globe. And the audience reaction to that, as you were kind of talking about there, Claire, is starting to be a lot more critical, and people are paying attention and saying, how can we justify this? Have you noticed that there is maybe a bit more storytelling around that kind of aspect?
Well, I mean, that's the age-old challenge, but I think is a lot of these things in sustainability, they're linked to cost. So if you can have cost efficiencies, then they're linked to being more sustainable anyway. You're using less trucks, there's less emissions, etc., etc. So I think you find promoters and suppliers are working much more closely now to try and find ways to minimise a movement, to minimise the same equipment being moved around. So whether they have more bases in different places with the same equipment, so they can replicate it, and the travelling's less, is reduced. But I think you've also got artists now that are very closely looking at that, thinking, do I want to go out on a global tour if it's going to have that impact on the environment? How does that sit with my ethics, as an artist and an individual? So the pressure is on, I think, but the likes of Coldplay obviously kind of, I would say, setting the standard in terms of the way that they're trying to operate.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about best practice then. Are there, whether we can name them specifically or not, are there examples that you're seeing that you think, okay, this is like the exemplar of what we should be doing, whether it's one of the big promoters you mentioned earlier, Chris, a couple of the biggest promoters in the world, or perhaps artists who are doing great things which are beyond box ticking, which I think is really important for us to talk about, because this has got to be sewn into the DNA of the organisation of festivals and live events. So, yeah, have you kind of experienced and maybe worked with people that you think you're doing really great and we need to tell the world about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I wouldn't say that there is one kind of exemplar. This is all perfect, but some people are amazing at one thing. Others have been real at the forefront of another.
Yeah.
I was just earlier today on a session talking about this, actually relating to food, and it was first done, I saw, at Roskilde Festival a few years back, but now with all of the Live Nation events or the festivals in the UK, they're doing a traffic light system on their food to show whether it is very high carbon impact or low carbon impact. And they've also banned beef because they know that that is the highest impact of all. And then they're trying to nudge in that respect to give people information so that they can then move towards plant-based, but once people are informed about it. I mean, there's others that have gone all out. I think it's Way Out West is one of the festivals that went 100% vegan. Forest Green Rovers, the football club that we certified, they've been vegan for over 10 years. And this is a football club. So if they...
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah.
And the reason that I mention that is because we've recently did a study where it shows... Often people say that 80% of the impact of an event is the audience travel, but it's normally excluded other activities that you would include within that. And when we put in food and beverage, food and drinks, then you can see that it's about a third at least is going to be the food and drinks. And that makes it about 40% is the audience travel. That's obviously varied. Some will have wildly different figures to that, but this is kind of, it's roughly on a par. And when you have plant-based food, then that is going to reduce those emissions. Normally we've seen that that's been up to a third, not to mention all of the biodiversity benefits and removing animal cruelty, etc. So on the food side, there's so much being done there, and that's cheap as well because you don't need to get new fancy equipment or anything in order to do that. But talking of fancy equipment, BST Hyde Park, run by AEG, they've been bringing in more battery power this year onto their site on Hyde Park in order to reduce the amount of running hours of the generators that are on site there. And they changed all of the generators to HVO, which is a hydrotreated vegetable oil. It's lower carbon emissions, but it's just an interim solution because it still has particulate matter. So we still have the air pollution situation, but it's at least lower carbon because it's not from fossil fuel. So they've done a lot on testing with big shows, these new technologies as far as powering the show is concerned. And then similarly with the HVO, we went on tour with Bring Me the Horizon. It was the first arena tour back after the pandemic. So I think it was 2 years ago now. But they, with KB Event, the trucking company, had HVO across all of the trucks that were used on site. And we also had 100% vegan food for the crew, which was, I think it was about 80 crew maybe, who were on the road for about 3 weeks. So that was challenging.
Yeah.
And that was seeing like how the culture really needs to change before you can do some of these elements as well. But something that you touched upon as well, as far as you know, what the larger organisations are doing. So by, for instance, Live Nation doing their Green Charter, and we've done a lot of work with AEG, who are doing, they're really pushing in order to make things happen. We just did with the O2 in 1975 and Curate, the world's first carbon removed gigs. They're going to happen in February after making all the reductions that we can. But by those larger organisations taking action, they give a signal then to the rest of the sector, the same when Coldplay gave their announcement, that says, we want solutions for this. So even if there aren't solutions, then there's lots of innovative organisations going out there and going like, right, we're going to produce like a really lightweight, like a piece of kit that's going to go out on the road so we can reduce the amount of trucking, or we're looking at the way that trucking can be done differently, or rerouting tours, or finding solutions that people can use. You can't expect to decide like we're going to be sustainable and then just do it like that, because even the local authorities aren't able to run sustainable local cities at the moment. The countries that we're in, this country, for instance, we're still subsidising fossil fuels and industrial animal agriculture. So how can you expect anything happening within this place to be fully sustainable? There's a few other forerunners, I guess, on the sustainability side as from the artist side. I mean, Massive Attack were really pushing. They teamed up with Tyndall, the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change, I think it's called, and they've gone as far as to produce even recommended legislation that could be implemented by cities. It's being trialled with Liverpool City at the moment, called Act 1.5, and they really wanted to get under the belly of like, well, what is it, and will we be able to do an exemplar event that shows, you know what, everyone can travel by public transport, it can be 100% vegan, it can be totally on the grid rather than batteries. So there's so much stuff happening.
Yeah.
On and on.
So,
In fact, I am.
I think one of the main ones that interests, we're talking about the big organisations like Live Nation and AEG, what they demand and the way that they behave, obviously, as you just said, has a massive impact on the supply chain. Everyone's fighting for their business. They have to enhance their projects and evolve their products to win their business. But I think, what Glastonbury's doing is important, really, when you consider it's,
Same
200,000, 210,000 people in the Greenfield site. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier on, transport to Greenfield sites is always a major consideration, and they're doing what they can there to encourage people, having a huge swathe of tickets that are only available if you're travelling by public transport or buses. But this year they powered the entire site by renewable energy, which is pretty amazing, bearing in mind it's that size. Yeah, but also just little things like looking at mycelium, building as a structure to build stages and
that was
pavilions
Team Love, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Team Love with the Arts Council.
I think they might have done it at Boomtown as well.
Yeah,
I think.
and at
But,
maybe their event Bristol Harbour Festival in the city as well. But yeah, mushroom grown
mushroom buildings,
stages.
mushroom stages, yeah, which is fantastic. And they're doing all
And they
sorts
should
of
serve mushroom tea inside them. bring it back.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have an event of that scale, making progress, and it sets the standard, I think.
And it affects the entire supply chain throughout the summer. Like with Glastonbury, for example, if they say everybody needs to use certified biodegradable serveware for any type of food, then they're going to get a lot of stock, the traders are, and then that gets taken out into the other events. And these are the kind of areas where I feel there needs to be more of a joined up approach, because we've on BST, All Points East, where we do proper composting in a very specific facility. It's called MVAR, if anyone wants to look it up. They can deal with PLA, like the bioplastics. But we have to check every single item on site that the food is in to make sure it's properly certified as compostable, not just biodegradable. And it's so much resource in order to do that. But if all of the caterers from the get-go for the entire season and for their winter events as well know every bit of food has to be served in a certified compostable container, then it saves a huge amount of work for all of the events. It's one of the things I think should be legislated for, actually. But
Chris?
I was just going to say it's all about driving change, isn't it, in terms of people's behaviour as well. If you go to somewhere like Glastonbury, the wonderful thing about that is it creates an alternative universe. So people behave differently. They're under canvas. They have a sense of freedom. They can learn different things from environmental bodies or whatever it might be. There's different ideas being exchanged, and there's different. It's a different kind of environment, and I think that people are open to learning in those environments. And I think obviously as a result, promoters, festival operators have a sort of responsibility, or at least an opportunity, to kind of educate people a little bit. And I think what I found really sort of heartwarming, that's the right way of putting it, was having seen published pictures at Reading and Leeds Festival, where obviously you've got a younger demographic who are straight out of doing O-levels, and they're kind of going a little bit more crazy maybe than someone my age at a festival. And you look at the debris and the abandoned tents afterwards, and it's absolutely shocking. But I know that they've been doing some really good work over there. For example, I think it was last year they launched an eco campsite, which was literally for about 1,500 people across the Leeds and Reading festivals. It went really well. Had brilliant feedback. So this year it's been, it's 10 times the size. It's something like 15,000 this year. So they're sort of driving people's change.
Yeah.
And they had like 98%, I think, of the tents were taken home, as opposed to probably about 5%.
Yeah, that
So
is an
it's pretty
amazing
impressive.
turnaround. Yeah, absolutely. Which kind of leads on to the audiences and the engagement of those audiences with this messaging, because audiences are hugely savvy in some sectors of the audience, some not so much. But I think there's what can definitely be said is that there is an expectation that sustainability and carbon consideration is going to be part of the integral planning of the event sector from two audiences, and that's the industry itself. I guess maybe the audience that you speak to, Chris, with Access All Areas, but then the audience who is going to be buying the tickets. So how well do you think festivals and events are doing in terms of expressing their sustainability in their messaging to those audiences? Is it happening, or is it not a key part yet?
It's a huge mixed bag, and I'll give a nod to a couple of festivals that do it really well, actually, because and in fact one of them was my inspiration, or part of my inspiration, alongside the Green Futures at Glastonbury and Kingston Green Fair and things like that, big green gathering. But Boom Festival in Portugal has been going for maybe about 20 years or so, and their entire ethos is about sustainability, but not in kind of like in a very holistic way. So they bring together lots of different cultures, and they're almost about rewilding humans as much as, you know, our environment, and they help you to really feel connected with the local environment, with nature. You know, you become very aware about water and energy, and bearing in mind it's a very hot, dusty place, but it's on the edge of a lake, so you're like, oh my god, I need water, it's such a precious resource. But they've been doing incredible stuff for years, and they communicate it through like all of their communications. They're not like a festival that does sustainability and tries to communicate it. Their entire ethos is about an interconnectedness between people and connectedness with nature, and that we are nature. But then still they get incredible data and graphics that show like this many people travel by the boom bus, we used this many litres of water, we composted this much food, and they're rewilding the site as well. So that's like Boom Festival Portugal. You can see their reports, and I think that they had a video about their sustainability initiatives from 2022, and I'm pretty sure it was the most popular thing that they put out, even more than all of their other communications about lineups and things like that. And that's not to say anything about the lineup, you know, to say how popular the sustainability was.
Yeah, which is again so encouraging from the audience point of view.
Yeah, and because they embody it, it's really got, you know, it's it has weight. The things that they say, you believe it. And then there's Digital Festival, DGTL, Digital Amsterdam in particular. They've had a mission since the start to be the world's first circular festival. So they're very focused on innovation and materials. That was the first place I saw the batteries, actually. But they were being trialled on the event site there with Zap Concepts. And they also have lots of infographics that make things really clear, but also quite inspirational, because you see the stuff that they're doing and you're like, oh my God, we can actually clean our water. We can have this cycle where there's no food waste and there's no meat being used, you know, and then we can put this back onto the land and make the soil fertile and then have more food later. And that, like, it's just really inspiring. So there are examples, and these guys have been going for a long time, where it's really ingrained and communicated well. There's other examples where it's very much not communicated well at all, and it falls like on deaf ears and blind eyes, I guess, because it's kind of a tag on. And often we've seen that some of the sustainability initiatives, so to speak, are more difficult, or you have to jump through hoops in order to achieve it. So, for example, it could be that there's like a green camping initiative, but you need to register in order to get in there, and there's all these obstacles, or there's signage that people don't even see when they're on site because it's not placed correctly, or it just doesn't land because people aren't already engaged and switched on. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to get people on board. My colleague Teresa Moore has just finished her PhD specifically on this subject, and she said in her field research she'd gone out and seen in her interviews that it was around about 20% of people that had even seen this massive sign about green camping that was on a walkway that everyone was going past. But if it's not part of your thinking already, if the foundations haven't been laid, then it's literally just the kind of white noise that you block out. So there's a lot more to be done.
Yeah. That's interesting, though, the thought that it has to, just as it has to be woven into the fabric of the DNA of an event and the planning of the event operationally, it also has to go into the messaging from the beginning and the communications, whether that's what's going out in your publicity to get audiences to attend, but then also on site, all of those messaging opportunities.
Yeah, and to make sure that the whole team are aware that that is your ethos or what you're communicating, so that it comes out in all areas, especially places where there might be different activations or sponsors and things like that. You need to make sure that it's cohesive, because otherwise if you're saying something with like on the one side but then you're contradicting it with actions elsewhere on site, it just doesn't land and it has no integrity. So yeah, it needs to be a kind of holistic approach.
Yeah, and I think that word integrity is so crucial, because it's got to be authentic. That's a very overused word now, but that, I think the integrity is key. And something that interests me, maybe from the B2B audience perspective, Chris, is I guess maybe the desperation of some festival organisers who might want to be waving the flags about what they're doing about sustainability, but it's not really matched by the behind the scenes thing. Do you see a kind of distinction? Don't name any names. I'm not. You don't need to. Don't throw anyone under the uneco-friendly bus. Just I'm thinking of maybe a distinction between those who are telling the story because they're excited to be doing something authentic, and those who are kind of maybe wearing a mask of it. Do you see that?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a bandwagon in the sense, isn't it? I think because everyone's moving in that direction, and I think a lot of the people that care about it most have been doing a lot of good work for a long time. They're immersed in it, and they're at such a far stage, if you like, that they're moving on and doing something that another festival couldn't possibly do for a long time, like Shambhala, for example, removing meat from menus for ticket buyers for the attendees, which I think is quite a brave move. And actually they had such strong feedback on that then it encouraged quite a lot of people to change their eating habits. So
yes, I've heard the same from people who go. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but there are other events that you do go to, and it's kind of great. You've not got plastic water bottles, they're in cans now. That's some kind of move, that's ticked a box, but then you look around a little bit more and there's still a long way to go. And I don't really want to name names, because I do think even the ones that I'm thinking of are actually taking positive action. But
and it's important for people to not feel discouraged as well,
Absolutely.
because what we also see is sometimes people won't say anything because they're scared of being shot down. And I was quite pleased to see with some of the artist actions that happened this year, when people spoke out, artists especially, a few years ago, they'd get shot down by people saying like, "Oh, yes, but." And this year, I don't want to keep on referring to them because they always get referred to, but when Coldplay said that they were using HVO, and then there was a massive backlash against them for the HVO. That's the biofuel. And I was really pleased to see there was a backlash to the backlash, saying, you know what, at least that someone's trying and doing something. And none of us, like I said before, no one's got all of the answers. As an entire humanity, we're trying to work out how to transition from the way that we're doing things to something different. And that's difficult, especially when there's people in the world that are actively trying to do the opposite. So we need to not beat ourselves up too much, and also communicate very honestly and openly. Don't be like, oh, this is the perfect thing that we're doing. But say we're trying to do this, and then if something cocks up, go, oh my God, this cocked up and this is why. This is how we're going to change it, or can we have your feedback? How do we do this more? And when we did the green tour work, we're really, really conscious of making sure that rather than going to the tech team, rather than going to catering, rather than going to the trucking company and saying you must do this, we collaborate together and go, you know your job better than anybody else. These are the general objectives of what we're trying to achieve. How do we do that together? Like, and what can the management do to help you to be able to make this more sustainable? And it's the same with the audiences as well. Like, why are you choosing that? How can we facilitate to make this better? Because this is the objective. So it's a conversation rather than just a one direction kind of a stick, I guess.
Yeah, and not trying to avoid being preachy or sounding self-righteous, which I suppose that's a really delicate balance as well when it comes to the festivals talking to their audience about what they're doing, as you were saying, admitting when something's not perfect, but also not making people feel guilty if they're not completely coming on the full journey, but they want to embrace certain elements. I suppose that that's a tricky balance.
Or you can go completely OTT and have like people dressed up with big mallets that go around and hit people when they're doing the wrong thing, kind of like a backhander.
If that's happening, I would quite like to go to that event just because it sounds fun. Is that a vegan burger? If not, this is coming at you. Yeah. So is there a common direction of travel when it comes to the communication of these things, or is it like the sustainability initiatives themselves? Is it very much a case by case situation?
I mean, you'll have seen from the communications that people send to you, so you'll be able to answer to this from a different perspective, but from within kind of advising, I suppose, etc., and then being part of different industry groups looking at sustainability, there's an attempt to have a united voice in relation to that. And there's definitely a lot of like everybody checks between each other as well. Like there's a lot of the organisations are being advised by sustainability experts, and then they all have their own meetings and go, okay, what's the consensus on this at the moment? But it's constantly evolving. And not everyone can speak in the same way to their audience because everyone's got their own identity and their own way of communicating. So I think that there's a push to have a united voice in some respects, but that might be more so in relation to communication to governments or policymakers rather than necessarily to audiences, because that's a more diverse approach. However, there is, and you'll have seen like things like carbon neutral no longer being permitted on products by there's restrictions on the way that things can be communicated because of misleading audiences. So the sector will be steered by those kind of elements, but I think that the general way of communicating has to be a unique, like I say, conversation with whoever it is that's your audience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Who is your audience, and what is it that you want to say from your own identity's point of view?
It's like you say, authentic.
Absolutely.
Integrity, because otherwise it's just we're all just parroting until we find out, oh, hang on, we've been parroting the wrong thing. Let's parrot that instead.
And as you said, it evolves so quickly that you can be at risk of saying the wrong thing, getting that backlash, which is all such a big part of comms consideration.
But I have to say also it's not that complicated, so don't feel like you can't.
And we will come on to that. Something that's a really important point. But Chris, Claire just made a great point to you, which is I'd be interested to know, in press releases and stuff that come to you about events, is there a kind of uniform place within that press release now which is addressing sustainability and how that's being looked at by events, or is it not quite there?
There isn't really a uniform way, but I think what's interesting is quite a long time ago, you would probably not even get now I get press releases that are purely about the sustainability. You might have seen that O2 now introduced a green rider. Obviously, there's the 1975 shows that Claire's AGF's involved in. And these press releases are coming out. This is what we've done. This is a groundbreaking move we've made. This is the association we've teamed up with. We're signing up to the Green Code or whatever it might be. And so it's very much at the forefront of B2B communication. Whereas it used to be maybe buried a little bit, that they'd introduced a few more public transport only tickets at an event, but so it's changed in that sense. I wouldn't say there's a uniform way that people are communicating. It's just become much more of a priority. Yeah,
which is great. As I said in the introduction, this is not a niche topic anymore. It's urgent and it's got to be a priority for all of us in our everyday lives, but especially when it comes to the responsibility that we have as business owners and event planners.
It's true. It used to be fun, my job, and now it's all serious.
What I think is interesting though as well is obviously just the number of organisations, the industry-wide organisations that have been sort of launching or have launched, been around for a little while, but now there's quite a few, aren't there? You know, there's Equilibrium, which is just looking at transport to events. You've got Powerful Thinking, which is addressing and sharing information and knowledge around environmentally more sustainable ways of powering events.
There's Isla on the agency side, and then Hope Solutions. There's like so many.
Yeah,
and there's
Judy's
Live
Bicycle.
Green, JB. Yeah. It's there's lots going on, but that's where those like I was saying before, where there's the communication needs to happen in many different ways, and now there's such a plethora that there's also sustainability groups where all those different parties come together and then they go out to communicate to their it's just endless meetings.
Endless meetings, and as we've kind of touched on, it can be a bit of a minefield, but we don't want to put people off when it comes to expressing and communicating their sustainability initiatives to their audiences. So how can it be approached without it being this huge, terrifying part of your comms planning?
Like generally as an individual, I'd say just always be bold and don't worry about getting it wrong, and be ready. Like if you know that you're saying what you believe to be true, and then you're ready to put your hand up if you get something wrong, then you can't really go wrong. And then for the larger organisations, obviously, that have their brand reputation and shareholders, etc., then get good advice. And similarly, I mean, when we give advice to companies, we'll say this is like, we've done all of the assessments, the audits, and this is how we recommend that you communicate it based upon the industry standards and how sustainability is speaking in it, like for it to be watertight. But you still need to be ready to put your hand up and say, okay, like actually we're changing direction, or this wasn't like we're now no longer taking this course, we're going to change, because it's an ever evolving space. But yeah, be bold and just be honest, I'd say.
Yeah, integrity in the root of all things, which
and guts.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need to be braver, I guess. Okay, so I feel like from this conversation, I'm going away genuinely with more hope, because and I really, really mean that, because it sounds like there's so many creative innovations. We are all creatives. We should be able to be resourceful and trailblazing and all those wonderful things. But there's so many different elements to these considerations, and it feels like different people are doing so many different things, and together maybe we can all make... I hate this. I can't believe I'm about to say this. I was going to say make a difference. Make an omelette. Make a better tomorrow. Yeah, make a vegan omelette. But yeah, can we collectively be hopeful about the direction that we're going in?
I think so, yes, and we have to be. But also I think that there's something much more important at the moment, in this very current moment, than getting our own house in order and being perfect, which we should always strive to. But as far as communication is concerned and media, the events, entertainment, music, sports sectors have got such a huge voice and profile. And at the moment, we're in a really critical, last 5 years. It could be even faster than we expected. The IPCC have told us about the rising temperatures, etc. We've had 70%, no, what is it now? 70% biodiversity loss in the last 50 years. And it's critical, and it can all recover. It can totally all recover. But what's happening at the same time is a culture war is being created, and there's people who are in power or fighting for power, not only here in the UK but around the world, who will absolutely mess up any efforts that we're trying to make. We could make a lot of policies here in the UK or within the events industry, I mean, but so long as we don't have a policy that supports renewable energy, that stops subsidising animal agriculture, that deals with all of these big issues, then we're going to fail. So the fact that we've got this platform to communicate, we need to not worry about being perfect and really use it to counter this misinformation and culture war, and to get people on board to the much broader transition that we need to make to a greener economy and a greener future. And it's literally like, these months now, this year now is vital. So communication's key.
Yeah. absolutely agree. Big responsibility, but massive opportunity as well at the same time.
So there's something called Just Vote 24 that's been started for the UK, which is trying to get young people into being able to vote. It's like, what do they call it? A party political, like, what do you call it when it's not for one party? I don't know political terms. Apolitical?
Apolitical.
I know, a party political broadcast.
Apolitical. Yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah,
it's apolitical. It's not a party, but we can have a party. Why not? And so it's to get young people voting, because at the moment they're being restricted from that because of the ID loopholes, etc. So the more that people can get involved in things like this, in the UK there's something called in the US there's something called head count, which is similar. We just need to really use our profile now to make sure that we're going into a future that we want to see, and that people's kids want to be living in or can live in.
Well, exactly. I think that's the thing as well. I mean, in the event world, as you touched on earlier on, has got that amazing opportunity to engage talent, whether it's sporting talent or whether it's an artist. I mean, you could say someone like Coldplay or someone, a band like Coldplay or an artist.
There are other bands in the world to choose from, by the way.
Well, I'm thinking
we love Coldplay.
Billie Eilish. I love the story about her getting the KFC arena to change. KFC Centre, I think it was the arena in Kentucky.
Yeah.
To change, to basically lose the naming rights sponsor for her performance,
Go
which is
big.
amazing, changing the name of the venue.
Yeah,
It's
that's
fantastic.
huge.
But artists have such a role to play, and I think the industry can work harder with artists to combine in their messaging and their communication to get a strong message across.
So hopeful. I mean, Billie Eilish has just given me a load of hope. I didn't know that. That's incredible. Brilliant. Wow, that's a great story to end on. Thank you both. I feel like I've had an education, and I think, and I don't mean that in a facetious way. I really do, because I didn't know
I hope it wasn't like a boring maths class.
No, not
Actually,
at all.
love
I feel
maths
really
classes.
inspired, and that I'm proud of our industry. I think we can do great things together, but we do have a responsibility. So yeah, thank you so much, Claire and Chris, for joining us, and thank you for listening, for watching to this episode of The Lens. We'll be back very soon with more inside insights to the creative industries.